Entering the Era of Multi-Dimensionality, Part 1.
Разделим информацию на две части.
We've divided the information into two parts. The first one is devoted to analyzing what is going on, from my point of view, as well as that of a number of academics, esoteric scientists, and philosophers. I will try to briefly explain the meaning of the events that happen around us. I will also do an excursus to the history, which will make some connections between those events clear. People often ask, why do we need this knowledge anyway? What do we need it for? The thing is, everybody has his own purpose of getting knowledge and for receiving knowledge. As for me, it serves as a sort of foundation to make us start from in order to move forward. So the future transformations don't actually need the knowledge as such, but at the same time, the statement that we can't live without knowledge always stays true. So if we can take from this knowledge the past experience, something that allows us to move on, we should definitely take the opportunity. That's why I've written, the knowledge is open to the one who is able to take and transmit it heedfully. Don't stay in your conceptions for too long, but feel free to utilize what has left in your past. What I'm going to do today is share what is necessary for me personally to deeply start into the unknown. The unknown that always charms, that always reveals something that makes you tremble and vibrate. For me personally, the year 2012 is the time for deep reconsideration of the whole system of the world structure. I mean, I could never imagine that 2012 would be such a big deal. I started getting information about 2012 back in the year 2000. I had my first acquaintance with the Tosokan Mayan calendar, as well as I had a great time reading The Mayan Factor by Jose Arguelles. I wouldn't say that I was captivated by the information, but there was a phrase which later appeared again in one of Arguelles' new books called Surfers of the Zavuya. It says that if you manage to catch a wave and move with it the whole way, you will discover a completely new world of senses, a new world of knowledge, a new world of understanding. So when you get an inner intention to catch the wave, keep to it. There is a cartoon, Surf's Up, and a movie, Point Break, that shows this edge between life and death, the edge between good and evil, the edge between truth and fiction. Those questions have always bothered me. My active research of the year 2012 has begun around 2002 to 2003. In 2005, I collaborated with G.A. Schneiderman, the man who had developed a huge stratum of information dealing with humanity transition into the third millennium. The second millennium has come to its end, has finished its rhythms. It's now time for the third millennium. It was the verge of millenniums, the year 2000, when this information began presenting itself and appearing in my reality, in my world. I've devoted 7 years of scientific work to this question. From 2004 until 2011, I was preparing maximum information to show that 2012 is just a point of transition to some new way of understanding the world order, the world outlook, and the universe. Now I can perfectly understand that there are plenty of world images. You can make as much of those as you like. And the way they appear depends on the way your thinking turns out, depending on the place you are at. If you are in the temporal conception of your reality, that will affect your ideas about the world. If you get out of hypnosis and look at the world from another perspective, you'll see it differently. There's an amazing movie called The Matrix, which I had a great time watching. Of course, there is much nonsense there. It's more than a show slide film, but there are some interesting fragments in it. When Morpheus offers Neo 2 pills, he doesn't say that one is enough. You are to choose whether you want to see how deep is the kennel or go back to your conceptions of what you know and where you live. Of course, Neo, being a creative person, couldn't resist temptation of seeing the unknown, but it turned out the way he didn't expect it would. And the amazing thing is that if we look at the synopsis, we get the same old thing. The interaction and the whole principle of life is nothing more than the war of good and evil, life and death, love and hatred, and all those questions.
Берем, так сказать, описание фильма «Матрицы».
I've spent a lot of time studying the way our world is organized, how the human psychology forms, how we materialize the space. I've put an enormous amount of time into this.
Гигантское количество времени. То есть, в принципе, последний...
Actually, I've spent the last 10 years of my life in this knowledge. Literature. I've met people who could show me something nobody else could. All that research resulted in understanding that as long as we stay in the dual perception of the world, we can't hop beyond the interaction patterns that exist there. We may augment as much as we like. We may make up illusions, images, items, but we can't get beyond the very principle of information.
Нельзя. Поэтому бесконечно...
That's why, when forming endless pictures of the world's duality, we find something new to ourselves constantly, but the very mechanism can't be changed. I've studied yoga my way, and besides, I did a little of Qigong, Taoistic love techniques, Tantra, read various philosophers, studied all the religions of the world. I was looking for answers. It's a monumental work which may well be called scientific, but as long as you understand that there exists dual nature of our world, the whole world will stay the same structure-wise. But if we are talking about other worlds, aliens differ. They may also have dual inner content. Then the structure of their worlds is the same as that of ours. That's why we introduced the concept of the earthly type worlds. There are myriads of those. They are being formed all the time, in many parallel states, by us as well.
Себя сами.
If we limit ourselves solely to the body code and by the things that we can see, by all means it will be hard to imagine. But if we put those limitations aside, we get a colossal range of possibilities. Then you start looking at things from the triad world, or quadrial, let's call it that way, world, where there's truly no just yin and yang. There are more constituents, and information is delivered by means of other codes, other feelings and sensations. We only need words to describe that. So eventually, when the year 2012 had come, it became perfectly clear to me that this image of the world was made up by me, and the thing I needed was changing my world outlook and acquiring a completely new way of understanding the essence of things. Because if the essence of processes is clearly delivered to you, you just begin accepting them. You just take them as they are. And when we start accepting the world's phenomena as they actually are, we can see our illusion as well as we see the anti-illusion. We start playing with these flows. And the more game possibilities we put into these flows, the more we pour into our emotional vessel, our consciousness. When talking about the concept of wisdom, by wisdom I mean the process when a person has the possibility to see what happens from several viewpoints at the same time. The ability to understand the depth of the processes and realize to turn the flow of feelings into knowledge that can be transmitted. Wisdom is ability to instantaneously see the unboundedness of the world from maximum number of perspectives. What is going on here? It's a process that reminds me of a rowing of the boat. We pick one particular water flow, let it go through us, and then move on. But if we are able to row from various sides, our movement becomes indescribably interesting. If we are able to see many informational processes from various perspectives and feel them instantaneously, we see the beauty, the appropriateness, and the fact that everything coexists with everything as flawlessly as we let it to by not doing redundant things, as everything we do instantly comes together and connects. But anyway, none of our moves may be called fallacious. It's not just a move. But until we understand that it's nothing more than just a move, we'll get confused. I was always told that have knowledge is very dangerous. One has to have complete knowledge. What is the beauty of integral knowledge? You may get an understanding from multiple perspectives. The integral knowledge doesn't exist. It's absurd. The knowledge is being created, formed, but there's an ability to perceive. Receptivity, sensitivity may be necessary for cognizing everything, the way we think and build up the line of reasoning, how the process takes place, and that process is very fast. We have an idea that there exists the yin-yang. What is that? It's a sign that indicates existence of certain duality of existence. The whole process of thinking is programmed to be a comparison of points. Here's the point 1 and point 2. That's how they look on the scheme. As we perceive the world in a yin-yang fashion, what really happens is we compare one point with another, and through this comparison, we learn the so-called of our world. When the process of comparison kicks off, that is what we call time. When comparing two states, departing from point 1, we get to point 2. As soon as we arrive at point 2, we immediately understand what the point 1 was. That's how it works. As long as we stay at one point, and we don't have the possibility to see other points, we can't compare it to anything. So we don't have a mechanism of comparison. The mechanism of comparison is what our brain work is all about. All that we store in our memory is our recollection and personal attitude that help us in building the world. Therefore, each time we speak, we will always depart from one thing and compare it with another. How many such variants may exist? Infinitely many. The knowledge that we store in our head as point 1 is necessary for us to stay and continue to point 2. As soon as we arrive at point 2, then immediately, if we want to move further, we go to point 3. And the points 1 and 2 stay in our memory. We push them away and move on. So the amount of information we need to push from the point 1 is our knowledge. The amazing thing is that there are people who don't want to know anything. They even admit it. No knowledge, God forbid. Why don't they want to learn? Because they don't need to depart from anything. Imagine a person that stays in the spot, here and now, all the time. He doesn't need to push off from anything. He doesn't need the knowledge of the past. He enjoys only what happens at the moment. Those people often look blessed. If you have the opportunity to watch people who don't use their memory very often, you'll see. They are blessed. They have absolutely magnificent eyes. They may be schizophrenics, morons, mongoloids. They have an unearthly divine look. They have different state, thread, demeanor. Everything is different. They don't need knowledge. They don't need memory. There are people who operate huge amounts of knowledge, who can deal with gigantic numerical rows, who know history well. It's always amazed me how Mrs. Besovska put together a gigantic stratums of historical data during her programs and university lectures. Those who process huge amounts of knowledge and are proud of being able to do so are usually pretty closed for the unknown. Therefore, to make them move, we need much knowledge, and the speed of their informational processes is likely to be lowered. You understand how many points you have to push off from to get into the unknown? And those people who are great with informatics are usually people of independent means. They don't care about materiality. They may have tons of it, but they won't care about it. Or they may have none, and they won't care as well. People who are good at operating the knowledge, people who operate informatics, are usually highly material. They have their significance, their attitude toward material goodness, the material world. It's absolutely natural, if you are a shallow person, the width of perception offers itself to you, but you don't cling to it. But if you are less shallow and you look deeper, then you need a different speed of the world perception. Therefore, each one has his own speed, and thus we can meet mystically oriented people as well as materialists. The mystics think the following way: I will never see unless I believe, unless I open an inner channel. The materialist has it absolutely different. I will never believe unless I see it. There is some difference in approaches. It absolutely doesn't matter which one of them is better. We often get both mystic and magic materialistic views.
Мы одинаково включаемся.
When we are trying to describe something, we always use the amount of information that we need for movement. One needs more informatics and less sensitivity. Other times, vice versa. One needs details, a clear-eyed understanding. How do you come up with that? Question: how do you come up with that? I have no idea. How did Einstein come up with his theory of relativity? Or where does cell phones come from? But those are nothing more than just questions. But a person who operates on low speed much of the time needs data to make a step into the unknown. Then, bigger amounts of knowledge, in my opinion, become dangerous. And the less knowledge, the less dangerous it is. But if we were talking about integral knowledge, the question is, can knowledge be integral or integral? In principle, there can't be integral knowledge, but there can be certain fundamental concepts where you are able to open up to the knowledge and not knowledge. And balancing on these states opens the ability of seeing and feeling another world. That's what we're going to talk about today. What does the difference of time stand for? It's just the speed of information flows, the speed of our perception of information. One person needs to receive 100 units of information within a second. Another needs to receive 1,000,000 blocks of data within the same time. What's the difference? It lies in an inner generator that moves to the future by pushing off from the past as it moves to the future. That's why our time is just like a multi-layer pie. In a certain spectrum, if we, for example, have an impulse speed of 10 beats per second, we initiate 10 points of knowledge per second. What does it tell us? It tells us that we hop from sensitivity with the speed of 10 jumps per second. We take a second as an earthly time, the pace of Earth. And if we move one level up, the speed of skipping will, for example, be 100 pulses per second. That means I have to release 100 blocks of knowledge in order to discover something new. One person okay with 10, another needs 100.
В чем разница?
So what's the difference? The difference is in perception. That's why some people are designers, others are composers, still others are carpenters, metallurgists, bank clerks, and some are people without name. Everyone has his own operational frequency. Our body has its own frequency as well.
Но наше тело
Earth has its own, a stone its own, an enamel its own. For example, a cat lives for 12 to 15 years, and we say that if a cat is 10 years old, it may be translated to, say, 60 human years. Why do we say so? We may easily compare the two. If an American drives at the speed of 30 miles per hour, a European knows that number as 50 kilometers per hour. What's the difference? 30 and 50 are different numbers, but the actual speed is the same. Why, for example, does Western society deal with matter, bringing ideas to life, promoting them, and creating economics one way, and the Russians do it completely differently at a different speed? This has to do with the speed of thinking. Russians are famous for their breath of soul and spaciousness. We don't want to break our whole territory into chunks and privatize them, whereas Englishmen do. Of course, you may say that 60 million Englishmen live on a small island and 150 million Russians live in a huge territory. We don't need this kind of materialization. We have a different speed of process. Moreover, a language itself defines the life quality of its speakers. all those aspects regarding language rhythmics, phonation, melodiousness, grammatical peculiarities, all that affect people who speak the language. That's why, when we are looking at a person, we are looking at civilization, society. Each one of us has his own times, his own time of living. English language speakers have their own lifetime, their own awareness, their own way of materialization, their own knowledge. A Russian has his own, and a Chinese has his own. They can't be united. Muammar Gaddafi wrote in his Green Book, "We have our terrestrial globe. Let's divide it into equal parts so that everyone gets an identical chunk." What was he going to share between an inhabitant of the Chucky Peninsula in Cyprus? A reindeer, a couple of moss, or a beautiful vineyard? That makes no sense at all. That's why each one of us sets his own inner pace of time. As soon as we create the concept of time, everybody gets his own. His own time to perceive, his own time to live, his own time of materialization of body, skin, mentality, history, and knowledge. There are nations, races that don't know anything about themselves and don't care about their history, as well as there are social models that hold their traditions dear. It's impossible to draw them out of those traditions. That's the way our customs are. I've spoken to one Armenian girl in Riga who wants to get married, and her father bade her to find an Armenian husband. If she didn't find one in Riga, she has to go to Yerevan to look for him there. There is a very small Armenian community in Riga. She says she doesn't want an Armenian, she wants a European. So the girl, who lives in European society, has a very hard time living between the two. I've seen many expatriate Arabs in London, young girls who don't wear yasmaks, who move away from those traditions, those bounds. They want to transit to a new time. They want to live in a new time. So how does one convert to another speed? How do you abandon what you have now? Here we have plenty of methods, and each one of us uses his own ways of dealing with time. But as we understand what time is in the world, just like the whole existence in our perception, that time, the element of time, it has the ability to make this jump over. It's like some live substance, some live essence that lives within us. This kind of understanding is essential for the transformation we are looking for. Ramtha's White Book has an interesting description of a period when Ramtha had already conquered the major part of the world, acquired great wealth, and embarked on the road of good. He ultimately got fed up with everything, and once, while sitting on a mountain and looking at his army and settlement, he suddenly had a wish to become a wind. He'd got interested in how it was to be an all-penetrating wind. So when I finished reading the book, it occurred to me, there's nothing interesting in being a wind. And what would be interesting? Then out of the blue, I realized that I needed to make friends with time. I started treating time like a living essence that lives inside of you, that opens up, that represents a life impulse. It turned out so that in my perception it may appear as some kind of hallucinogenic image, but time is nothing more than a live fundamental, a live entity. There's a myriad of such entities. I have the ability to jump from one into another entity and ride them like horses. You've chosen fast time. It starts dragging you onto a new level. It feeds you with gigantic amount of information at enormous speed. But you can't do that with slower time. That's why we have a race car like Formula 1, which has its own images of the world, its own vibes, as well as we have a racing car like the Fiat Multipla or Citroën 2CV. Why not? It also knocks around, but has a different vibe, a different speed, a different materiality. When we are talking about time, we are talking about multidimensionality, about how and by what means multidimensionality forms. Multi-dimensionality appears only in cases when we have the opportunity to use various types of time. Time is another dimension. Therefore, 2012, in my opinion, and in my understanding, is an essential transition. The ability to work with various times and to do this flawlessly. In synchronicity. It happens sometimes that a person goes mad. He jumps around and does crazy things. His eyes burn. He puts out weird information. And we call it weird because we don't understand it. What happens to him? He just has turned on a different frequency. He operates on a different frequency. He perceives it differently and tries to drag those feelings of high-speed time into a lower-speed conscious stratum. Therefore, the informatics-related conflicts are inherent to the society that lives in the past. That academic knowledge, that Academy of Sciences always serves as a hampering factor for development, and you know that. Why? Because it has its own speed of changeover. It has to recount everything, to make sure, to put forward an hypothesis, to check for informational links, to somehow put this hypothesis into its time. It's necessary to slow down the speed of the new hypothesis, to translate it into a form of past perception, and only then will it be safe to say, yes, it's possible. Cybernetics used to be a pseudoscience as well as genetics. The Academy of Science has a department of pseudoscience. Why? Because it's natural. If we are operating in different times, because there is a science and its antithesis, a pseudoscience, there is a fast-flowing and slow-flowing time. And as long as we operate in different times, we will always come across such situations. But if we want to move away from understanding time as some essence and ask what the world would look like without time, the very attempt to put your mind into timelessness will get your consciousness running. The mind's time-stopping meditations serve this very purpose, to come to understanding time in order to look at it from another perspective. When we operate in accordance with time, we have a concept of cycles. How does a cycle form? A cycle is actually a representation of time. Assume that we have one point and another and we sew the time together. If we do so, this temporary constituent turns into a circle. But if we put the 2 points into one plane, we will get a straight line. And if we move the second point up, we get a kind of spiral. So the transition from one point to another takes the shape of a spiral, and development takes its course. And when we portray the development of existence as spiral, we may move up or down the spiral. We just move from one spot to another. We put them not in line, but one above another. And what if we put all those points in one place and lock them? Will we have any kind of spiral there? No. Time instantly stops and concentrates in one spot. When we draw such a pipe, for example, a pole or a spine or something similar, we get the spots that are arranged in the shape of a spiral. Each one of those spirals may be given as a cycle. For example, when the movement from one spot to another stops, one cycle comes to its end. Also, we may represent our life as certain cycles. Moreover, it is necessary to represent life as cycles if we want to get any answers or make any forecast. If we want to prognosticate something, we want to somehow see a different structure of the world, we use the following form of informational feed. If we don't need it, we break the approach down in time. That's why there's virtually no use in understanding the mechanism of cycles formation. But if we are solving certain problems, they will be by all means have to deal with the concept of task time. For example, here we have a cycle, and if we want to initiate certain programs, for example, we have some goals, we have the point 1, which may be called the beginning, and we have the point 2, which may be called the end. It's natural if we have assigned one point to beginning, the point 2 is going to be either the midway or the end. We take the two yin-yang style states, beginning and end. And as soon as we've got beginning and end, here's the time of this move. We may describe it as a program. But a program always appears. We create the concept of a program when we say that there's the moment of its launching. If there's a goal, then there's the way to the goal. And it always seems to be the inevitability. It's almost always impossible to stop the process. And if we have defined some action as the initiation of the program, and we have the picture of the end in our consciousness, or we have assigned some spot to be the moment of the goal completion, that is going to be the end. Therefore, somewhere there's also the beginning. And as soon as we've built this into our head, there's no way out. We immediately launch the cycle, the task time. So when they say, fear your wishes, they're talking about this mechanism. What happens when we make an attempt to break this cycle? All of a sudden it's occurred to us that we don't need that. For example, a person who wanted to grow the third leg, he started taking some potion, but soon he realized that he grows not the third leg, but something else. He screams, "I don't want that!" What happens at this moment? I've assigned the task, set the goal, and now I'm moving towards it. The whole universe starts gradually contributing to the process. And if a person says, "No, stop," all the energies that have already got involved in the materialization of the process now have to go somewhere. And where are they supposed to go? Something is going to happen. The energy that initiates the programs can't disappear. It has nowhere to go. Yes, I'll admit this. It may gradually dissolve, may transform into another state of reality, but it will always transform. So if a person is ready to break the cycle initiated by him, he has to understand that the energy that has been used for creating that world is immediately going to start transforming. And the sharper your direction changes, the more painful the strikes of the energy are going to be. Often we see people that all of a sudden fall ill, for example, start coughing badly. What happens? They are moving in one direction, and then they had realized that they didn't need that. They make a hasty decision to take a turn, and due to that angle of deviation, the energy of the former direction has to be damped and readjusted. But where does it get damped? It gets damped in your own world. That's why, before changing one direction, one has to think the things over carefully. If you like when your bones crunch or your windshield cracks and everything around rings and falls apart, you may feel free to make this kind of move, and don't complain that such things happen. You shouldn't worry about our country's rich deposits of iron, whereas you only have one head. But if, being aware of this process, you are ready for soft changes, the transformations will go flawlessly and unapparent. But there's no way to omit the program. It may be redirected, but what will be happening in this case is a new program, a new level. But the thing is, we have plenty of ideas. Have you ever noticed that when you have various plans, and some of them are aimed at developing your intellectual activity, others pursue social processes, still others are directed at biological processes, developing of your body, all of those take different time. What we have at the end of a line is a huge mess of various programs. I'm just saying that there are different inner cycles. Our consciousness, our mind operate in different directions. And each direction has its own perception and materialization time. Therefore, the huge amount of various cycles, big and small. We are looking, for example, at spiritual cycles, 9 years, biological cycles, 7 years, social cycles, 5 years. There exist even separate fields of knowledge that consider that if, for instance, a person is 35, his 5-year and 7-year cycle unite, as 5 times 7 equals 35. That means that some of his 5-year cycle has come to an end, as well as his biological development. But his spiritual development still continues, as his spiritual cycle ends when he's 36. There's knowledge about these various cycles and how they interact with each other. There are points when many of our cycles programs end. For example, there are points where many ideas, goals, and tasks suddenly can flow in a spot where everything is over. So this is a conditional point in time where numerous cycles end. They stop. There appears a state of emptiness and pointlessness. There are no goals. I have no idea which objectives to set now, as every objective, by interacting with others, creates some general tinsel or common direction. But in a certain moment of life, all that comes to its end, its limit. And a person's mind may understand that the further spiritual development makes no sense. Social development makes no sense. Development of the body and healthcare makes no sense. What then? When there comes the moment of total pointlessness, this indicates the fact that various goals have ended their existence, figuratively speaking, in one point. The upper third picture shows that various cycles end their run in one point. At this moment, a serious crisis ensues. It's not just a crisis of thinking. It is a crisis that involves absolute social torpor. It may also negatively affect biological shape. In general, this may seriously harm everything. A person feels extremely uncomfortable. Nothing gladdens him. So when the crisis delivers its massive blow, some people notice that all of a sudden everything goes down. Work falls apart. Health falls apart. Relations fall apart. I am alone. There's nothing. God has turned his back on me. It's a real nightmare. What am I supposed to do? I suppose I'd rather go and hang myself, but what's the point? This actually indicates the confluence of numerous times, numerous programs, and a person finds himself in some uncomfortable, which is probably just a new state. Now about depression. What is depression all about? What causes depression? Pointlessness does. Or is there another kind of depression? One doesn't want anything. The funny thing is, dying makes no sense either. I've experienced this kind of depression. I thought of jumping out of the window, but what's the point? There's no point in dying. I was ready to die. I felt horrible, disgust, muck. I've come up to the window, so I'm going to jump. But whenever I tried to reach the ground in my mind, I couldn't do it. I would fly to some other place. That's why when they say that when a person falls from high altitude, what happens is immediate departure, and what strikes the earth is just his trunk. You may try this out and tell me about that. Here's the way I get rid of depression. I go out and buy the dumbest and most stupid American comedies like American Pie or Borat and watch them when I'm depressed. everything falls into place, although not right away. It takes about a week. You lie on a sofa and watch stupid comedies, because humor and not mind, a great technique by the way, help you start putting your stuff together. There's a good saying, what goes undistorted from the Creator is humor. Everything else contains distortion. Unlike sneezing, it happens without distortion, as well as that state of boom when you, for example, haven't been to a WC for the whole day and now you've got the chance in that first second, just watch it. It comes from the Creator undistorted. It's a feeling of total rapture. Humor is when a person laughs, because when a person falls down, it's humor. When a person stands up, it's humor. It hurts him. It's humor and you laugh at it. A person falls in love and you laugh too. If in this moment you start crying, it's a feeling, a state that is impossible to describe. And these unexplainable states that happen during depression or crisis cause cancellation of unfinished cycles. Of course, we may look at it from various perspectives. We may think that it is us who makes it end sometime via some mysterious parallel consciousness. Maybe. But if we are talking about cycles of 5, 7, 9, 11 years, our memory surfaces something that we won't call prejudice. We'd rather call it descriptions and observations. For example, a family has lived together for 3 years. His first crisis in the family. 12 years. Another crisis. What is that? It's just an observation. Where do these cycles come from? They come from multi-level nature of time. Each level has its own task. And we, the people, are considered as multi-personality creatures who operate at different speeds. We've got the general knowledge about how things work, don't we? Yes, we do. Can we give some advice? Yes, we do. We love to see that someone follows our advice. The thing is, we, knowing everything and giving advice, never follow those useful tips. The question is why? The question is why? We can't change it, and it will always be that way. For knowledge is one speed, and as soon as it is at speed, a memory is a development of personality. Therefore, the all-knowing, all-sensing personality is us. And if you have to vocalize this knowledge, you have to use vibrations of sound, translate it into words. And words mean using symbols, following the path of knowledge. And as soon as you know something, you lower the frequency as you need to operate it. So if I know something, and I know everything, then in order to share this, I have to lower the frequencies. If I lower the frequencies, I begin dealing with a different time. I'm working with a different time by pronouncing words. Therefore, I may give advice. But to follow it, I have to lower the frequency even more so that my body could slowly start implementing it. And if a person isn't ready to work in sync with what he thinks, what he says, what he does, what he has not just done, but also saved, handed over, augmented, we are pretty safe to say that he doesn't tune into the multi-layer pie of his personalities. He doesn't work with times. And maybe he doesn't need to. We often say that it's easy to make money. It's much more difficult to save and even harder to multiply it.
Слышали такую фразу с деньгами?
What do we mean by making money? At a certain information and time layer, money is considered just a holographic re-reflection of your creativity into society. You started mental spinning, and in order to materialize, you need to find an instrument. And the hologram of your creativity re-reflects in the shape of money. Therefore, on certain speeds, money is just a tool of reaching a goal. They have no other mission. We've already mentioned people who don't very much care about money, regardless of whether they have any or not. What's that? It's some informational constituent. When we were talking about money being harder to save, which means we've already made some, to do so, you have to bring what has been earned in the informational layer down and hold to it. Save it. Creativity of saving is working with different time. And if we need to augment what we have earned, we need to go down to the level of money flows, the level of cash flow management. That means we have to know where they are going. It's an extremely difficult task. It requires launching a different materialization process. And if a person is good at one-shot search of money, but then he has no idea what to do with it, he may give the job to the lower levels of the hierarchy that will deal with it. Therefore, there's an opinion. Who is the best at coping with money? Who possesses and rules almost the whole mass of money in the world? The Jews take almost 75%. Why the Jewish people? Why is that?
В честь чего? А посмотрите, в чем
Look at the individual traits of the Jewish nation.
еврейской нации? В чем?
Knowledge. Humor. They hold knowledge in one hand and humor in the other. What is knowledge? It's a slow vibration, a strict distribution. If you hire a Jewish person as a financial director, you've made the right choice. Why? Because he is going to have perfect understanding and knowledge. He will make precise calculations of how, why, and which things are to be done. He will show the direction, only there. Why? Because only this flow will bring you money. The questions of ethics or aesthetics stay out of the picture. We are talking about money. The Jewish people are followed by the Korean and the Japanese. The Japanese have discrete traditions. What are traditions? The absence of light speed and informational processes. Therefore, the information planes we work with define the material environments we feel inside. Thus we know everything as one person, speak as another, and do as a third person. But it seems to a person that it is one individual. It is an inner point of view. We see a body, and who we are is a many-faced entity with a body. The one who does things this way has a material view. If you start seeing an individual as a multi-person, and each one of those is a live world that works with its own stratum of informatics and realization, the whole new picture opens to your eyes. It gives answers to many questions. There was a question from the audience about humor in Jews, mentioning that you were talking about the Jews, so humor is the second trait of their national color? The answer? Yes. Humor has a fine border with futility. The ability to be futile carries huge informational value, channel support, and the ability to fuel serious calculating projects with this quality. They are given the opportunity to work with this flow. What stands behind that? This is a topic for another talk. Why aren't Jews allowed to pronounce and write the word God? Even they don't know. But there is some thin matter that stands behind that. But in this 2012 related lecture, I won't make a turn towards analysis of the nation's color, its time, and the ability to materialize. This may take a separate lecture to cover. That was just an example. When many cycles come to their end, a person starts feeling this crisis of emptiness, pointlessness, where none of his further moves or ideas bring him to a desired result. Why is that? The thing is, the ideas come from past programs. Ideas are from the past, and nothing new is being created. And this crisis point may be calculated not only for an individual, but also for a society development program. A society must have some goal. The Soviet government promised that by the year 2000, each citizen of the USSR would have an apartment. Did we get that? No. Why? Because there wasn't any USSR in 2000. The USSR program was broken. If it still existed, who knows? Maybe it wouldn't be that bad. But when we are talking about those crisis moments, while considering the development of civilizations or society, we understand that they also have their tasks that sooner or later also come to an end. And 2012 is considered as this kind of a point where a huge amount of tasks close. Besides, here the programs of individual development are going to be included. As a rule, the 2012 question concerns people who have already lived for 28 to 45 years. This is an age when the topic's vibration is especially strong. Why is that? Because it is a midpoint of life. Let's look at the first picture. Here we see a cycle. One arrow points upwards, the other points downwards. If we imagine life, we have one cycle: birth and death. Let's take it through by imagining there is birth and death. And if we picture this cycle as a spinning wheel, then by placing a point on a 0 or 12 position, we, by spinning the wheel, will bring it down. And as soon as it touches the ground, there will happen a sort of pause, after which the point starts moving upward. Thus we have that within one cycle there is a descending and ascending flow. And those are different tasks. So if we assume that the lower point, or point 6, is a midpoint of life, there's likely to happen a crisis. It is called the midlife crisis, when everything you have been doing and known doesn't make sense anymore. We just take it as a conditional example, as our hierarchy is much more complicated. Our organization of inner circles is not that simple, but the principle remains the same. I've spent half of my life on a descending wave. I've been setting my goals that way. And now that it's over, the goals have to be reviewed. Therefore, we plan our life. We have our objectives at various planes. If we are looking at high-speed informatics, we have one kind of purpose there. For example, I want to learn 28 languages. The lower speed has it like, I want to build a house, give birth to a child, plant a tree. Going even lower may imply something like collecting stamps. So a person sets various goals. And so it turns out that 28 languages are mastered by the age of 45. The lower level is complete. Either the house has been built, the son has grown up, the tree is also there. The collection of stamps is also complete. What happens then? The sense of life has come to an end. What would be the further goals of the 45-year-old thinking subject be? As soon as all those endings can flow in one point, some kind of conception change has to happen. The conception does change. That ascending flow is there just due to that. This ascending wave changes something inside. Now, we are not talking about what particularly does it change, but it does change and launch something. Therefore, we look at the year 2012 as a crisis of civilization, the crisis of difference in the levels of thinking and aims our civilization pursues. They are very polyhedral, but they are at different layers in their time, their task. So in some point, like our positions 6 and 12, all those objectives, cycles end, and the civilization doesn't know where to move next. What are today's goals of our society? I'm blessed if I know. We've paid some attention to the question of a purpose, as it was necessary for me to illustrate this theory of cycles, the theory of times, in order to show the appropriateness of what is going on, so that you would accept it and not condemn it, so that you can see those natural laws. When we see the natural laws, it becomes easy for us to deal with it, accept it, and keep on searching for our place. If a person is not 45, if it's not his midlife point around 45, I've never met a 15-year-old concerned with the issues of the year 2012.
Вообще.
The same goes for those who are about 65 to 75.
70, 75. Я был на...
I've been to a concert of Igor Guberman, a very particular and peculiar artist. He has his own interesting views on life. When he got a note asking, "Tell me, please, what is your opinion as for the year 2012?" he answered that he tries not to think about bullcrap. Igor Guberman is a mature man. He is about 70. He is not going to change anything in his life. It's impossible. He lives by his own principles. He creates. And this issue is out of his concern. Youth doesn't care about that. Those who have passed the midpoint of their life don't care either. So who is concerned? It concerns only those who need to change something inside. Those who are able to make changes. Those who are ready to see how deep the kennel is. To eat the pill Morpheus has offered. To see. To attempt something new. Those are the people who realize the importance of the date. I often hear, "Come on, read this damn lecture that tells us when we are going to kick the bucket and that's it." Why is that? It's because everyone's fed up of waiting for the end. Everything is dragged into it. Everything is about to end. Changes are needed. What to change and how to change? From the audience, you drag a huge mass of information there. The answer, the whole space gets pulled into it because termination happens on numerous layers. What is the way to make a sleeper wake up? To awake the sleeping consciousness? The audience, fear. Answer,
Как человека разбудить? Как спящий...
not fear actually.
Вот как?
The thing is, when everything terminates, the end comes, and it is quite a scary thing. But what is fear about? The fear lies in the fact that you don't see the next point. And if you don't see the future, that is what they call the end. If we enter the state of the end, for us the end equals the end of existence. And the process of existence, absence is the absence of free choice. You have no choice. If a person has no choice, absolutely everything stops existing. And this can't be. The freedom of choice is the first and only rule of the universe that regulates everything. So to stimulate a person's breakthrough, a person's getting into new time, to switch him on, he needs to get an acceleration kick. The most powerful emotion from a kick is fear. Because as long as we don't feel fear, we don't care too much about anything. As soon as fear comes into play, we're waiting for the end, the finale. At this moment, a person gets all tense. As soon as fear appears, we don't need the knowledge of the previous. Fear rejects it. It stops in on one point and it has no further move. What happens is compression. Therefore, it will always have an opportunity to exit. Or the state of total sleep, when he says, okay, I'm taking it easy. I'm going to wait. While the planet is in danger, I'm going to get home from work earlier and just wait. It's a perception. Therefore, fear is always necessary for the kick. So people first go get information from those who will give them that fear. Fear is always a low frequency vibration. People often go first to fortune tellers, witches, shamans, and many others. And those are craftsmen of low frequency level who tell you, that's bad. Give me money and I will help you. And a person starts paying money to get rid of their fear. And what does it mean? To pay money? Why does it go into those kinds of holes? Money is like energy. We've discussed it earlier. To open new possibilities, we have to forget the past. And if you don't want to rip up the past, but you want to find new possibilities, you find yourself at the fork. How do you deal with it? Then there appears a condition that makes the wish to move on overbalance the intent to hamper the process. There also appears structures, some call them scavengers, that start withdrawing money. They start withdrawing this past energy of bonding via the money and affinity to money. That's why all the law enforcement agents who practice graft, all the corruptionists, all the fortune tellers, gypsies, all that low frequency spectrum starts taking all that trash from a person who wants to move forward. That's why any corruptionist is a junk eater by his essence. It's his function. You know that there exist worms that eat civilization's wastage. Are they important? They are extremely important. Besides, we have to understand that we are the same junk eaters as they are. The difference is that we consume the finer waste products of some finer civilizations. On one hand, we eat a higher frequency junk and turn it into a low frequency junk and pass it down the hierarchy. So it's not that big of a deal. On the other hand, and we don't want to admit this, but those are details, that's a matter of personal viewpoint. Therefore, when we're talking about those vibrations of fear, the person gets deprived of things he is attached to. In this particular case, money. They tell him, that's all right now, the hex is gone. You may go, but it would be better if you bring some more money. How much? They use rulers to measure the batches of bills. People sometimes come to me with a request to break a hex spell. What? A hex spell? Well, I can deal with the hex. I may also cook you a love potion. No problem. But the question is, why would I do that in the first place? I'm doing my job. Everybody does. But the energy of fear is necessary. It drags and pulls a person to the new, the next level of task. Therefore, when a crisis arises, there's always going to appear a gigantic amount of structures, scavengers who begin cleaning out the undone and the irrelevant programs. That's why today's regenerating Russia witnesses an absolutely appropriate level of corruption. As for me, I would lift a ban on corruption and say, go ahead, guys. I would proclaim corruption national joy, national pride. Let every corruptionist, every true corruptionist rake our past junk in heaps, as they won't be able to use it anyway. They will retransform it for a future generation. Where does that money go? It's being invested into real estate, into the development of manufacturing. That money does work. It doesn't hang around. It's being cleansed and utilized in this way. That's why I would provide each corruptionist with milk tickets, just like donors receive nutrition. Corruptionists are the great good. They are perfect junk eaters. They need support, for they shovel our crap. Of course, I feel sorry for them. Their role is ugly, but unfortunately, it's necessary and it's the truth. So that's the way I see it. It's an appropriate process, thus each level has its own junk pump. Once you have used it, release it. Then the use will be passed down. That's how the hierarchy works, and that's what the hierarchy looks like. From the audience. So nothing is going to be left after for us? If nothing is left, that means they are doing a good job. But only within time and frequency's frame. The lower frequency comprises different layers. Such processes do exist. It's impossible to stop. That's why fear is necessary for this kind of transition, for this kick, this push, this pop. And when we are talking about programs, about the root, here are those two spots of a cycle, the upper one and the lower one. But there are at least 4 spots. And the life of a person will always include 4 main sectors. They are arranged so that it is not important which one of them is the first and which is the second. I've deliberately displaced the first one. According to the logic, the first sector on our scheme is supposed to be the place of the second one. But I didn't want to bind you to these images. It's not that important. The main idea is that we have 4 different times: forward, back, up, and down. And each one of those implies its own rhythmics, its own task, its own objectives, its own life quality, its own time. They are just like times of the year. 2 cold ones and 2 warm ones. 2 bright ones and 2 dark ones. 2 that awaken and 2 that close. The same goes for life. We experience 4 different states. That's why we, for example, have she's fresh and sporty on the wrong side of 40. What's that about? Regeneration. There may be at least 4 crises. The crisis of birth and goal setting. If we assume that a human life lasts 100 years, we have 0, 25, 50, 75, and 100 transitions to different states. At my lectures, I don't draw 4 stages, as it's too hard for understanding. I usually mark out 3 stages: 25, 50, 75. Different sectors, different tasks, different aims. For aim is always necessary, it's very important. The same is in the life of a person and his family's life as well. Family has its own task too. People get married, create family. What for? Well, building a social unit. Great.
Построить ячейку,
Giving birth. Marvelous.
родить детей. Очень хорошо.
Building a house. Planting a tree. A garden. Harvesting potatoes. All outstanding. Then what? By the age of 35 to 40, people suddenly realize that those goals have passed. They wonder, what are their next purposes? If there are no purposes, a crisis kicks off. Crisis is an absence of the goal. We will later see how this works together, how these goals regenerate. But for now, let's have a look at the following information block. For example, a person's development consists of 4 sectors of various goals. And how much of those does a society's development include? Well, at least 4. And if we are considering the civilization's development through many millennia, the picture stays the same. There are specialists. We call them fortune tellers, astrologists. The latter work with cycles. They monitor the cyclical movement of planets. How do they work? They understand the dimensions not only of a human, but also those of some models. They look at how such and such social models are going to develop. And as soon as these society models, civilization models,
Задачи человека.
human tasks can float in their ending, full stop, an individual crisis, social crisis, or civilization crisis strikes. One of those crises is the year 2012. It's nothing more than just a mathematical point where numerous program cycles join. They come to an end. It's very personal for each individual. Therefore, someone doesn't care about 2012 at all. For someone, it has major importance. Someone just fears this state. For him, it's already a state of death. And the state of death is absence of running programs. The life is over. There are no programs. New goals haven't been set. That's it. The end. For goal is life. If there's no purpose, everything stops. It dies. That's the way it works. Therefore, are there any chances that the year 2012 is going to be the same for everybody? Yep. It makes no sense. You can't give that answer. For a person who plans this, certainty can't be the end. And for the person who agrees that it's all done, it's time to change the whole program. It, by all means, is going to be the end. That's why for certain social layers, this means development. It means movement. For someone, it's the end. Someone doesn't care. Mass media have different interpretations of that as well. But in their majority, mass media hold the society in awe. Why is that? Those who are approaching the end of the program, all states, which come to an end, they start agonizing. Agony. What is that? How can we describe the state of agony? How does that feel? Someone from the audience? Panic. Okay. And what do you want at that state? Audience? Burning. Okay. Cleaning something out. Purification. Audience? To spit something out. There is an agony when you, for example, get fired from your job. You have to collect all your paper clips. Steal some markers. That's also agony. Something has to be kept. Something has to be saved. That's how the process goes. Therefore, a person who is in the process of wrapping up a program gets an element of agony. A very unnatural behavior. Where does that unnatural behavior come from? The thing is that an individual sense of time switches on, as well as an interpersonal essence that rules all these processes, and it resonates that the program is over. If that is a program of life, of a body's vital activity, that means that the body has been used to its maximum and is now not necessary for reaching new goals. For example, the person dreams of turning into fibers of light and flying. A question arises, so what do you need your body for? This person has to die as a body and undergo transformation. Why? Because a body can't fly. So the body starts agonizing. It understands that it's done. But a body is not just a body. It consists of skeleton, muscles, nerve endings, hair, skin. It's a multifunctional pie. And now certain states start vibrating inside of it. And those transitional vibrations may appear as agony. And here it goes. The process of pointlessness. Grabbing things. Closing random programs. Submerging into that funnel. The weather-changing spin. And one part of us dies, which is that pointlessness. And the other catches up the information of the novelty. You see, the body dies, and all of a sudden it realizes how interesting the process of dying is. This interest gives rise to new objectives. Those new objectives open the possibility corridor for the other informational layer of our essence. And everything starts gradually transforming into that space. There's no such thing as death. All the layers, like a clock's gear, work at their speeds. If one dies off, a new one comes into action and carries on. Such a gigantic essential mechanism operates inside of all of us. And you can't figure it out. Where am I? Where are the borders of me? Am I bone? Am I body? Am I spirit? Am I mental? Am I ether? Where am I? I appear everywhere. But each program ends sooner or later, and we consider this program agony. When we reflect, going into these stages in our human perception, when there's a body, when there's a mind, consciousness, information, those 4 stages, the stages that we have drawn into the shape of a circle with the crossing, the yin-yang, and re-reflected yin-yang, it gives this combination. If we assume that every human consciousness, let's take human, goes through this development stages, then, for the programs of Earth, a human goes through 3 main developmental stages. I conditionally put them like this. The first stage is when a person perceives that there's him and there's the outer world. It's a certain kind of work in a certain time period. There's me and there's the surrounding world. Here is an I point, and the second point, the object of the outer world. What is that? It's a certain speed. If we take a more in-depth look at this, it all is present in us in the shape of these personality layers, and we are integral in everything. Certain layers operate and switch on at any kind of time, and one of these layers is a development stage. Usually, this stage takes place somewhere between 0 and 33 years of age, which means we have 33 years for the first stage. 33 years is the so-called age of Christ. Why 33? They include special 11-year cycles of spiritual, social, and biological development. Those 11-year cycles come to their end, and what appears as hopelessness at 33 is a fragment of re-reflection. Re-reflection of what? World outlook. Ideas about how the world is organized. That's what we are looking for. And then, a person has the opportunity to change and enter the second stage of development, where the outer world is included in understanding of self. We sort of broaden the private property of our personality. Our personality embraces the whole existence plus the non-existing. It says, it's all me. The objects of the outer world disappear as such, in a frame of idea that it's the outer world. They instantaneously become courtesy of my creation. It's the second stage. This stage takes us, if we assume that a person uses the 100-year lifespan, between the ages of 33 years and 66 years. Then, he gets an opportunity to transit to the third stage of development on the planet Earth, the one that implies absence of such a concept as personality. There, the concept of multi-level personalities comes into play, and you perceive personality as something reminiscent of a handful of dates on a plate. Your personality looks like lasagna, where the lowest layer of pasta is a denser personality. Then there are various other layers of personality, each having its particular taste. And this multi-layer quality is, all in all, a creation. There exists a different point of view. It is possible to do some talking about that. It's quite an interesting topic, but to tell you the truth, it's a very specific experience that is absolutely depersonalized. Today we've touched upon depersonalized, that third level of development. Actually, there's also a fourth level, but there's no border between the humane and the inhumane as it is. Therefore, we actually have 4 quadrants of possibilities, tasks, progress objectives. But if we are talking about the humane, for the time being, I draw only 3 stages of development. Therefore, such crises as the year 2012 are usually a transition from one stage to the next. For those who are at the first stage, the whole principle of world understanding, that's me, and there's the outer world, comes to its logical end. What reveals is the vibration of the level of actual perception that I and the creator myself. How did I manage to do that? This takes some emotional experience that we all go through in life. Therefore, various cycles, various stages, various programs set the rhythm for various purposes and tasks. And as soon as the first stage of development ends, this moment will by all means be tinged on the absence of meaning of life. I don't know what to do next. I haven't got the faintest idea where my life should go. There appears a crisis of faith. Today, we often hear that 2012 is rather a crisis of thinking, a crisis of believing. Believing in what? In the way and how the world is organized? It's 1. What the hell am I doing here? It's 2. How am I to adjust to it? What am I to do about it? That's what the crisis is all about. So the transition from one development stage to the next implies impossibility to live the way one used to. The ruled can't live the old way. The rulers don't want to live the way the ruled do, and the ruled can't become the rulers. What a mess! Let's divide everything among people, said Shirokov. Muammar Gaddafi has written his green book, but we all saw him come to no good. And so on. We can only watch how it occurs in life. But the fact that it may be launched this way, that's what I wanted to illustrate. Thus, we are approaching the worldview crisis. The 3 stages of development are inseparable from a person and the society he created for going through on his own individual path. So, if we are standing at the first stage of development, then who's the creator? That's right. The outer world has been created somehow. Things happen here somehow. At crossing to the second stage, you understand that you've created everything yourself, that you are the creator. It's self-deification. This stage, all the 3 stages are amazingly illustrated in a movie called Groundhog Day. If you watch it with this in mind, you'll see how he went through all 3 stages of the cycling. What happens there is the single day, the same cycling. And the hero goes through various stages of life. He proclaimed himself God. Then he tried to commit suicide, but he couldn't. Then he almost went crazy. And where did he find himself in the end? Serving. What a marvelous movie. If you watch Groundhog Day and break the events down to stages, you'll see amazing things. That's how evolution goes through its stages of development.